For this week's study on finance and investment, I'm going to delve back a ways into a previous class where I ran a rather extensive financial analysis on my previous employer, Pfizer. There was a lot of source material on this company's long and successful history, so I figured this would be a great place to take some snippets from that paper and present them in PowerPoint form. Pfizer was founded in Brooklyn, New York in 1849 by two German cousins, Charles Pfizer and Charles Erhard, which initially started as a local chemical concern. They became successful by engineering citric acid, bought more property, and continued to evolve into the global pharmaceutical conglomerate they are today. Since then, they have remained dedicated to developing new and better ways to prevent and treat diseases around the world. The company was worth $3.4 million by 1906. There was a shortage of calcium citrate needed to engineer citric acid during World War I, so Pfizer was looking for an alternative. In 1919, they discovered a fungus that ferments sugar to citric acid, and were able to commercialize production of citric acid as a result. They applied their new fermentation skills to mass production of penicillin during World War II for treating Allied soldiers that were injured. Pfizer produced the majority of penicillin used during the Battle of D-Day. In 1950, production of terramycin changed the company from a manufacturer of fine chemicals to a research-based pharmaceutical company that it still is today. Pfizer developed a drug discovery program focusing on in vitro synthesis to aid in its fermentation process. Pfizer also established an animal health division in 1959 with a 700-acre farm/research facility in Indiana. Around this time, Pfizer had established offices in Belgium, Brazil, Canada, Cuba, Iran, Mexico, Panama, Puerto Rico, Turkey, and the UK. In 1960, the company moved its New York-based medical research laboratory to a facility in Groton, Connecticut. In 1980, Pfizer launched its first billion-dollar product, Feldene, a prescription anti-inflammatory. During the 80s and 90s, Pfizer maintained success in growth production of popular drugs such as Zoloft, Lipitor, Norvasc, Zithromax, Aricept, Diflucan, and Viagra. Pfizer has recently grown by mergers, including those with Warner Lambert in 2000, Pharmacia in 2003, and Wyeth in 2009. On June 26, 2006, Pfizer announced that it would sell its consumer healthcare unit, which is a manufacturer of Listerine, Nicorette, Visine, Sudafed, and Neosporin, to Johnson & Johnson for $16.6 billion. Development of a drug meant to increase production of HDL cholesterol was cancelled in December of 2006 because more patients died during clinical trials than expected, with a mortality rate increase of 60%. Pfizer lost nearly $1 billion developing the failed drug, and the market value of the company tanked afterward. Pfizer is currently being beaten in the stock market by its chief competitor and next-door neighbor in Kendall Square, Novartis. An interesting bit of information I've noticed was that one of Pfizer's major shareholders, which holds the most amount of shares only second to their number one shareholder, the Vanguard Group, is State Street Bank. On a side note, State Street has aggressively tried to recruit me on many occasions for an IS security position that I turned down due to the boring nature and low pay of the job. I find this coincidence a little eerie considering how both companies are known for hiring outsourced IT staff, usually from Hewlett-Packard, for very low pay despite an otherwise friendly and laid-back corporate environment. I wonder if both these companies have something more to do with each other than what's on the surface. There are also many other major financial holders, such as the aforementioned Vanguard Group, who owns most of the shares, BlackRock Trust, Capital World Investors, BNY Mellon, which actually has a branch office in my hometown, Franklin Resources, Wellington Management, Northern Trust, BlackRock Fund Advisors, and Price Associates. Considering how the majority of their shareholders are all financial institutions, it's no wonder why they are worth so much and have been able to last as long as they have despite many controversies and failures they've had over the years. There are also a number of financial institutions that have mutual funds with Pfizer, and Vanguard and its subsidiaries seem to pop up on that list more than a few times, as well as SPDR and Wellington Management. It's interesting that a company that handles over $3 trillion in assets in its 40 years could have so much of a hold on Pfizer. This is probably what its driving financial force is today, and they may not be as successful of a company as they are without them. Another interesting coincidence is that in 2012, a UK branch office of Vanguard purchased some neighboring Pfizer property. The fact that they work so closely together geographically and can make more money from them by acquiring property from them kind of gives off the vibe of a symbiotic relationship between the two. Pfizer can't function without Vanguard, and possibly Vanguard may not be able to function without Pfizer. Since Pfizer's assets only make up a decent portion of Vanguard's clientele, I don't doubt that Vanguard could succeed without them, but not nearly as easily or as efficiently. It seems as though Pfizer has a reputation for being a tax dodger. It's listed as number 3 on the list of the top 15 companies with the most offshore holdings, behind General Electric and Apple respectively. This may also lend credence to why they're so financially successful and resilient. According to the Americans for Tax Fairness, they paid absolutely no income taxes from 2010 to 2012, all while making $43 billion over that period. This was due to them shifting its domestic profits offshore and got a $2.2 billion tax refund as a result, and also got $3.4 billion of contracts funded by taxpayers. They didn't start bringing their profits back home until the government offered to give companies refunds, earned $10 billion in savings, and then laid off 10,000 domestic employees. Pfizer was also convicted of trying to sell drugs to Medicare and used a loophole in the law to get a subsidiary to pay the fine so they could continue what they were doing. This doesn't come as a surprise to me. Companies like Pfizer have been under a microscope for this kind of thing for a long time, and I can't honestly say if I were in charge of a company of that magnitude and could legally get away with it, I wouldn't either. A lot of people don't believe in taxes, want every dollar that they earn, and not to be told how to spend it. And of course, they can make the argument that the more money they have, the better they can provide people with the medicine they need, but I doubt that's the sole or main purpose. According to a financial report from Pfizer in 2013, their plans for 2014 were to spend upwards of $1.3 billion on property, plants, and the equipment therein. Most of that money will go toward maintaining what they already have, and since they have facilities worldwide and have them for over half a century, needless to say that this is going to cost a ridiculous amount of money. Pfizer has earned it all and then some, and should have no problem pulling it off. After a humiliatingly publicized event of a cholesterol drug resulting in premature deaths, one would think the company would have been wiped off the map. But considering they emerged from the scandal virtually unscathed, the cost of expanding and maintaining the company should come to them pretty easily. Since Pfizer is a drug company, there is significant risk that their products can cause irreversible damage, even death, and they need to make sure they have money to cover lawsuits and settlements should a claim against them be filed. For instance, in 2002, a woman named Linda Shearer claimed that Pfizer's anti-seizure medication, Neurontin, made her husband commit suicide. The basis of this was the fact that Pfizer promoted the use of the drug despite it not being FDA approved, and had prior knowledge of a suicide risk and failed to advertise it. That particular suit only cost Pfizer less than $400,000, but 2 years later they had $430 million after pleading guilty to a criminal charge based on its promotions of the drug. As a result, more suicide and personal injury lawsuits were coming over the horizon, and the drug that once bought them $2.7 billion in 2003 had now lost its patent. In 2011, Pfizer's board of directors authorized a share purchase plan worth $10 billion, which had since been exhausted as of the first quarter of 2013. In late 2012, they had authorized yet another one, which was also exhausted in October of the following year. Once again, in June of 2013, a third share purchase plan was announced, and trading began that October as well. In a 3-year span, Pfizer spent $30 billion on share purchasing for its stockholders, not to mention the billions they pay in dividends on their common stock, which is usually over $6 billion. Considering first quarter 2014 shares are worth a dividend of 26 cents per share, that's a ridiculous amount of shares available to the total that much of a yearly dividend. Current and projected dividends are supposed to provide a return of shareholders while maintaining enough capital to keep the business up and running. The value of the dividends is determined only by the board of directors and is not restricted by any debt covenants. The fact that they can still purchase billions in shares for its stockholders whilst maintaining necessary capital to invest back into the business makes me wonder why they are really that rich, or are their shares ridiculously cheap. Until now, the thought of companies having to invest into their own stock for their shareholders didn't enter my mind as a possible expenditure, but this is another one not covered in the section about it in our textbook. Capital isn't just for maintenance, projects, and mergers. There are also many other expenditures that vary between companies and are dependent on their corporate culture. Considering Pfizer has pled guilty to criminal charges before and has been accused of other shady goings-on makes me wonder how they're able to pull all of this off. I will say that after working for them, they do notoriously underpay their employees, especially contractors like myself, give them cut-rate health benefits, considering they are in healthcare. If one could dig a lot deeper into their financial records, I'm sure we could find all sorts of horrible things they do to make all their financial success possible. In 2005, Pfizer faced financial trouble when a lot of the patents on their drugs were going to expire. They decided that simply cutting costs was not going to solve the problem, and decided to start outsourcing some of their jobs. This led to them creating PfizerWorks, a program that outsourced a lot of its mundane tasks like data entry and other clerical work to firms in India. This is a cost-effective way of getting work done for the least amount of money, and in India's large population, an overwhelming amount of poor who need work makes this easy, albeit somewhat opportunistic get. This wasn't the only outsourcing they used, however. I can tell you from my experience that their IT staff was almost completely hired by contract and paid abysmal salaries. I was told by a coworker that the janitors literally made more than us. Their IT help desk call center was located in Costa Rica, so anyone who called for a computer problem got them before they created tickets to send to us if they were unable to solve the problem remotely. Whenever something with the network went down, it wasn't an easy fix because their network engineers operated out of Bangladesh. It may have saved the company some money, but it was not an efficient way to run their IT infrastructure. I've worked at worse places than Pfizer, but still this wasn't great. They outsourced their IT from CompuCom Workforce Solutions, where Pfizer is their #1 client. I've been told that CompuCom is simply Hewlett-Packard by another name, which explained why we were all listed on the roster as HP employees. The fact that HP is operating under a different name is a little sketchy to me, and I wonder if this isn't to avoid some kind of loophole, since I've already discussed that Pfizer is a notorious tax cheat. After I left the company, Pfizer ended its relationship with CompuCom in favor of another company, for reasons not made known to me. Some points to take away from this. 1. Make sure your products don't kill people or cause them to commit suicide. Pfizer may not have been able to predict that their HDL drug would kill people in clinical trials, but they definitely knew Neurontin had a suicide risk and chose to keep it a secret. To prevent yourself from lawsuits in the future, you should either make sure your product is free of that risk or let people know upon release. 2. Getting backup from major financial companies as shareholders seems to be a great way to stay afloat even in the midst of horrible controversy. How to appeal to them to get their support is a different story. However, this doesn't mean take advantage of your virtual financial impunity to engage in shady deals. 3. Pay your taxes. Even if you can pull strings to get away with it legally, it'll hurt your company's reputation in the long run. 4. Same goes for exploiting legal loopholes to make and save money. Offshore holdings may be a good thing if you can get away with them, but it'll put you on the wrong people's radars. 5. Outsourcing is a good way to save money, but it takes advantage of people who are desperate to work and will take less than ideal conditions just to have a job. If you insist on engaging in it, make sure you do it ethically. Finally, shady dealings may seem like a good idea at the time, but they can ultimately sink your company both financially and in the public eye. A good reputation, in my opinion, is preferable to unhinged greediness, and said acts can come back and get you in the long run.